Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen O'Brien. I am the city clerk. Home-based role for me is the city clerk at the city of Guelph. I'm in an acting role now in our HR department here. But most importantly, for this discussion we're having today, I am the actually now past president, immediate past president of AMCTO. I'm joined here today for our Q2 Municipal Monitor Extra with Bethany Lee. Bethany Lee is the Director of Customer Service and Communications at the town of East Gwillimbury in York Region and is the former Director of Communications with Peel Region. Bethany is the author of our Municipal Monitor Q2 cover story, which I'm sure many of you have seen. And that cover story is entitled Lessons in Communications and Leadership from the Front Lines of Peel. So I want to say welcome to you, Bethany. Thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephen. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Great. Thanks so much. So I guess that, maybe I'll sort of paint a little bit of a picture for folks that may not have had a chance to dive into your article in depth. I'm sure a lot of folks in our association have seen it, but it really is a top-notch piece. So kudos to you, Bethany. It's one of these things when I was reading it that immediately there's transferables to other municipalities, but really talks about resilience and leadership and obviously based on your role and your professional expertise around communications during the unfolding of the news about the dissolution of Peel Region, something that I think many folks in our sector have been watching. And so maybe to start, Bethany, you could provide us with some further context about where you were and the mindset you were in when you first received the news of the dissolution of Peel.
Super. I'm happy to chat about this because I think there's sort of a story behind the story. And for the readers who have read, thank you so much. And for those who haven't, take a peek. You'll see in the photography that's shared with the story and sort of the analogies within the story, there's a lot of references to the ocean and sailing and storms. And the story behind the story is that actually I was coming from a boat delivery across the Atlantic Ocean. So my family, it was quite the journey. And that's not my normal area of expertise at all, but I was joining my family, some retired Navy folks who are, now sailing the world. And at that time, they invited myself and my husband to join them on this cross-Atlantic journey. And we were just going halfway, but halfway or a third of the way is about 1,000 nautical miles.
Wow.
And during that time, we would have been away from land for about 8.5 days. So this was quite an adventure for me. That happened May of last year. And during that journey, we saw the most beautiful sunsets and sunrises. We saw dolphins. We saw all of the things that you can imagine, the physical challenge of sailing. About halfway through, we were hit with a surprise and severe storm in the middle of one of our nights. And I happened to wake up and be sort of startled by, the boat's always moving. There's a lot of noise. It's tough to sleep at night, but you're so physically exhausted that, you usually do. But something woke me up saying, this isn't right. And I went up on top deck, our night watchman, there were 5 of us on the vessel, and our night watchman was really in a panic and calling for help and calling for an emergency. And so we woke everybody up, and we were really being tossed about like you couldn't imagine. It was sort of a nightmare come true for me. But everybody went into action, and I think that that's something that resonated with me. Within our little crew of 5 people, we had different leadership styles and different styles of reacting. So I mentioned that my family members and one of our other crew members were former Navy folks. One of them actually was a former Navy SEAL. And so people who were trained to respond in a situation like this, but they still brought different parts of their personality. So, my cousin, he was the captain of the boat, and he's very even-keeled, so to speak, very experienced in emergencies, commanding different people to do, particular parts of their job, staying calm. That's his role. The former Navy SEAL, Frank, Bostonian, very much a frogman at heart. So, doing, he was running around the craft. He was securing different things that were flying off the boat. We were experiencing a torn sail, and so he was immediately going into action. What can I do to fix in the moment? My other cousin, Talma, she actually comes from a bit of a communications background as well within the Navy. So she was immediately, getting on the radio, and we were working together to understand like what were the next steps. Were we communicating as a team? What do we need to do next? We're both planners at heart, and we were taking that role. And then my husband, really he is a tremendous support person physically, so he was really physically again helping. And there were just different components of leadership that I think showed up in that moment. And our trust, it already existed, but it also grew during that moment. After the storm, we cleaned up the aftermath in the morning, and then we had about 4 or 5 days of sailing, if you will, without a sail. We had damage to the craft, and we had to fix, we had to sort of nurse our trauma from this storm. We had to make plans on what was next, and
Wow.
we had some really some boring times also, like just puttering through as we made our way across the ocean. And that I think resonated so much with me. Once I landed in Bermuda, I had a day or so, and then we were getting on the plane coming back home. And that was when I heard about the dissolution announcement for Peel. So imagine I'm sort of recovering from what was quite a traumatic experience, but also really beautiful in some ways, where we came together as a team, we supported each other.
Yeah.
We had good moments, we had sunsets and sunrises again,
Yeah.
and then getting on the plane and hearing of this news. So it all sort of felt like the same time for me, and those lessons of going across the Atlantic really stuck with me throughout my work with Peel in communications and supporting the senior management team and supporting the entire staff through that time. So that was kind of my mindset to your original question. And I'm happy to share sort of more about what the following days and months were like.
Yeah, I mean, like, wow, what a harrowing journey. Like, it just, that's wild to hear about that. And you're literally out of the fryer into the fire kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
maybe you can, exactly as you alluded to, like, maybe you can sort of like, what was the first call with your leadership group, like the folks that directly reported to you at Peel as a communications team? What was the first call like with that group?
Right.
And what were some of, maybe you could talk about a little bit of some of the outcomes that came out of that phone call or that meeting, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I think, just to let you know, one of the things that I think is so special about communications within the municipal sector is, we're also connected, right? We're also dedicated to this work, and we're so connected. And even as I was getting on the plane, folks knew I had been, off on a vacation, and they didn't quite know, the extent of
It's quite
the
the
fun,
vacation.
the fun on this vacation. But they immediately reached out and they said, listen, we want you to know what we're hearing and that what you're walking into, and how can we help, right? So immediately the team, I think, and I think we see this in the municipal sector, we are helpers, we are doers. And so immediate connection to what was happening back home and preparation. And sort of as I landed in the next morning, Gary Kent, our CAO, had pulled together, and I talk about this in the article, had pulled together the senior managers from across the organization for that early morning phone call. And I'm going to say, Stephen, it was really difficult, hearing these words. I think that it was very shocking. There had
Yeah.
been a little bit of, talk in the media, and even as I was sort of in transit, the open and transparent nature that Gary and the commissioners at Peel, how they tackled this head on to say, you know what, we're hearing some rumors. We're going to let you know as soon as we have more information. It had already started. So that philosophical approach and that leadership approach was already underway. As we
Right.
hopped on the call, I think that the team was really listening, and they were quiet, they were absorbing this news. And I think one of the things I can say, sort of as I describe the leadership of our communication team, is some of the first questions were, what can we do to help? What can we do to step into this space to support you, our leadership team, to support our staff? So, those are some of the outcomes. I think just
Yeah.
setting the stage for something's happening here. We're in a bit of an emergency. How can we help each other? Just keep in mind, I think, everybody in the municipal sector is also still recovering from the huge, huge lift of COVID. So we had, many folks who are tired and just like thinking, okay, well, we're getting back to regular business, and we're able to pick up some of the strategic work that we had to park for a few years. And so even while there was this sort of forward thinking way of like, how can we support, there's a lot of exhaustion of folks, and
Yeah.
just sort of at the same time a recognition right away that this is a crew, just as in many municipalities, that's a bit tired out, and how can we balance that? So I think those were some of the first things that sort of came through in that call. Real willingness to step up, to be in the space, to help however they could, to be creative and thoughtful, and as well at the same time recognize that folks were really tired, and this was really a serious blow.
Yeah, that empathy piece is a key piece, and we've heard that through a lot of these different articles we've done about leadership and the importance of empathy and being there to support a team. In that vein, and maybe you can talk about, there's in the article you talk about a couple of sort of communication principles that helped guide the direction of really your team's work on internal and external communications around the whole issue. I
Hmm.
thought those were really great statements, and I think they can be applied. This is what we try and do with these sort of
Yeah.
municipal monitor extra pieces, is tease out some of the things that can be applied and adapted to other municipalities in their work. So, were these principles that you revisited when it came time to then communicating about the government's decision to then roll back some of the changes around Peel, and maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of what I'll call like the bouncing ball, or maybe it's a yo-yo is a better analogy
Hmm.
of where
Hmm.
we've seen Peel go through in terms of dissolution, maybe not full dissolution, like it
Hmm.
still seems to be very fluid. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those principles that you outlined in the
Yes.
article, and how they can be applied to other municipalities, and are they things that you revisit given the changes?
Absolutely. So thanks for that question. And I'm really glad that these principles sort of were included in the article. To me, this is something that can guide sort of our strategic communications, no matter what you're tackling. And these principles, transparency and honesty, predictable voice and timing, consistency and messaging, yet at the
Yeah.
same time, tailoring for your audiences, because within municipalities, let's face it, we have many different people
Yeah,
doing
you get
many.
different pools of folks.
Exactly. Open up to two-way communication engagement where possible, and also that empathy and trauma informed. We've been through a lot collectively around the globe over the last few years, and we
Yeah.
continue to be. So this is something. So these principles, I think, while basic in nature, I think they take you back to how will you do the work? How will you act? So, given that this was, very sort of sudden news, and we were tackling with many unknowns, we didn't have all of the answers. But if we had principles to go on, then we would be able to always check back to those principles and say, are we communicating in a way that we've committed to for the
Yeah.
organization? And I wouldn't say they're just principles on paper. They need to be ingrained in the culture of an organization. And that, to me, again, that first phone call, those pre-messages, this is what we're hearing, we're open, we're concerned, we're going to report back, that sort of transparency and honesty, it sits at the top of the chain. And it rests with, our organizational leadership. If you put these principles on paper, but they're not being, sort of like taken to heart, if they're not living and breathing as part of the organizational culture, then they're just principles on the paper. Subsequent to the original announcement, I had a few people reach out from other municipalities where they had heard, rumors that they might be impacted by similarly. And I said, what, the first thing you can do is sort of be open and transparent about what you're hearing and seeing. And if that
Yeah.
can come from your top leadership, that's going to make all of the difference for your staff, because they're going to know that
Absolutely.
you're supporting them and so on. And, I'll be honest, there was a few folks who said, our leadership's not willing to talk about it. And I
Wow.
said, is your staff struggling? And they really are. So I think these principles, without the commitment of leadership, without the commitment and pushing from a community, like a strong communications leadership point of view, they're just words on the paper. To your question about, do we go back to them? Absolutely. I still think, that these principles are are could be used across, many different situations. They're nothing, magical. I just think that they're sort of, how we can guide our communications when we're tackled with either small challenges, large challenges, great change, organizational change. It's, I think they're transferable, and I think that's something really special that you can, folks either in communications or in leadership positions, they could take these, put them in their pocket, and use them, as they go through their career. Frankly, I would almost always in a communications strategic plan or strategic, response plan, have something like this as guiding
Yep.
principles where we can all agree this is how we'll act. And then your messages, they're going to come. We're going to be able to, put those
Yeah.
together as we get more information. But this tells us how we'll do the work. And that's
Yeah.
something I was really, proud of. And thankfully, we had the right leadership, I think, to push through in this regard.
Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting. I mean, it's so common, the concept of strong leadership at the top. And I had the chance to know Gary. You mentioned the CAO at Peel, and I know
Mhm.
that he's held in high regard. And I would imagine, never worked with him directly myself, but just from what I know of him, I can imagine that there is that really strong aspect of clarity in the messaging and the communications. So with that, maybe you can share with us real quick hit. Uh, Short and sweet, the top three lessons that you learned after going through the experience that you did with Peel.
Oh gosh. Well, I think I would put right at the top to constantly be working on your culture and your
Yeah,
relationships. In my world, relationships are everything. We constantly nurture those relationships, and then when we're either challenged with something big like this or just a day to day, so constantly be working on your relationships. I think from communication standpoint, constantly be working on your communication style and approach with different groups. A large organization like Peel or a smaller organization like where I am right now with East Gwillimbury, we have different pockets of staff. So constantly be working on nurturing those channels and and how you reach out to different groups and make sure you're making those connections. And really, again, back to one of those principles, empathetic, just be real, right? We're all real people. We're all going through different things at different times, whether it's an incredible boat ride across the Atlantic and, or somebody's, child is sick. We're all real people. So I think, again, you can get really caught up in legislation and the media and so on. But every day when you come to work, remind yourself that you're working with real people.
yeah.
They go home at the end of the day. And if you can sort of bring that in what you do, I think you'll be that much more successful.
Yeah, that's great. That's such a positive message to end on. Thank you so much, Bethany, for sharing your story and your experience with us. I encourage again everyone to read Bethany's story and the other great articles in our Municipal Monitor edition that's out now. Again, lots of great content there, and Bethany's story is certainly the anchor to that issue that we've put out most recently. So again, thank you so much for sharing. I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed these Municipal Monitor extra stories that we've been doing. Again, with the series, that we really want to bring the stories in the Municipal Monitor to life and provide a little bit more in-depth discussion around some of the topics that are covered in those stories and then the things that matter most to you, our members. So stay tuned for more Municipal extras to come along with each issue of the Municipal Monitor. The next one will be outcoming and will be hosted by our new president, our new association president, Paul Shipway. I can say, Paul, I'm really looking forward to watching the next one that you do. Thanks again for everyone for tuning in. And as I said at our conference, I really do want to say this is sort of maybe one of my last chances to echo this again, but it was a really distinct pleasure of mine professionally to serve as AMCTO president in this last term of the AMCTO board. It was an honorable and humbling experience, and I did not take it lightly, and I certainly appreciate all the wonderful support from all our members. I hope to connect with you all soon at upcoming AMCTO fall programs and events. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful summer and take care. Thanks so much.